Joining me now is Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina's 1st Congressional District. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, last time you were on, we had talked about your experience at the Capitol riot. It was just about a day or so after, and you explained sort of that timeline of events all throughout Wednesday. Now, this week, you seem to have a little bit of a back and forth exchange with Representative Ocasio-Cortez on Twitter. Can you, first start there and walk us through exactly what happened?
That's actually putting it mildly. I would say it was a little bit more than that, but I guess earlier this week on Wednesday, I saw a news report that was describing Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's experience, and when I read it, I knew immediately that some of the information presented was inaccurate, because one of the things that Newsweek had intimated and said that rioters were basically here, like there was that imminent danger when you read the article, and that just wasn't the case. There were not insurrectionists in the hallways of our office building for most of the day. Many of us here were barricaded in our offices with the doors locked, and at some point during the day, we had to be evacuated because there were threats on Capitol Hill. There were pipe bombs that were delivered to the Republican headquarters and then also the Democratic headquarters. And so when I saw that, I initially was taking the media to task with how they were describing the events that AOC went through. And then yesterday morning, I simply put a one-sentence tweet and just stated the facts that there were no insurrectionists in our office building or in our hallways of our office building. And she went off on her favorite platform, Twitter. And we had a back and forth, and then Congresswoman Ilhan Omar got into it as well. And the old adage goes, judge a woman by the enemies that she keeps. And if the squad's coming after me, then I know I'm in the right place and doing the right thing.
Well, I want to go back to something about the media coverage of it. And like you just mentioned, and you've been critical of this Newsweek article, as well as, more broadly, the sort of the media coverage of it. Why do you think, the media sort of, I guess was light on the details and
the media went apocalyptic based on my tweet stating literally a simple fact. I deal in facts and not fiction. And if you watch the media coverage yesterday of the exchange going back and forth, it was ridiculous. And this was a traumatic day. This was a dark day in our nation's history. I've been one of the most vocal members of my party about the events that day, the events leading up to it. My life was threatened. Someone threatened to shoot me on social media, for example. And so this was serious, and we were all fearful. I felt, and I've said many times in January, that I felt like I was a sitting duck throughout the entire ordeal, and that I had to literally walk through a crime scene to go and vote in the middle of the night to the objections to the Electoral College. This was an awful experience, and no one is belittling it or minimizing it in any way, shape, or form. And then you watch the coverage of her and our exchange yesterday, and it was just totally over the top. I mean, people should be able to express. We all like the First Amendment, respect it, and share what happened. I've done that. AOC has done that. But what we can't do is fictionalize what actually transpired. And the rioters were a 7 to 10 minute walk away at the Capitol Hill Dome. That's where the events were happening. Now, you read the police reports. There were some rioters that knew that some of us were stuck in tunnels underneath the Capitol. At one point, I was, when we were evacuated from our office building. But it didn't go further than the Capitol Dome area. It didn't come to our offices. And that's really only the point that I was making. And everyone just went apocalyptic over it. And we got to deal with the issue in reality and deal with the facts and not just make stuff up.
In a recent Fox News article or interview that you did, I should say, you talked about Representative Ocasio-Cortez having this, tendency to politicize literally everything. How do you think she was politicizing, what was happening?
Well, just the feud that went off on Facebook. I simply just stated a fact. One very simple sentence. There was no emotion behind it. I wasn't attacking anyone. I was just simply making a remark and making a statement of fact. And then to have the exchange and to talk about being a survivor. AOC, and I share many experiences in life. I was a victim of rape also. I was a survivor of rape, and I've told that story and shared that story. And to come at me in the way that she did, I thought was really appalling, and was surprised and shocked by it.
In one of her tweets, it
Hmm.
seemed that she was essentially accusing survivors of
Hmm.
exaggerating. I mean, what do you make of those comments?
I mean, we should never, ever, accuse someone who's been a victim of trauma of exaggerating an event. But when facts are literally made up, it's our duty to tell the truth. We should not have politicized this event. We should be speaking the truth. We should be real and authentic, and deal with facts and not fiction. And at the end of the day, that's what really this was about. And I just couldn't believe the way the media had taken it and ran with it. There were not rioters banging down the doors. The Capitol Hill police were here to protect us. The only ones between us and the violent rioters that day were our police. They were here to evacuate us when we had to be, when there was a nearby threat, imminent threat, and they did their job. And she disparaged the Capitol Police this week, the same week that Officer Brian Sicknick, that we paid homage to his life and his selfless sacrifice. She disparaged Capitol Police last month. There is no place for that. Now, do we need to be looking at and getting questions answered about how this happened, how this was allowed to happen, and what preparations were made or not made? When was the National Guard called in or requested or not? There are questions that we have, but the last thing we need to be doing is disparaging the very people who are here to defend us.
Mhm. And just one last question for you
Mhm.
along the same lines of tweets that Representative Ocasio-Cortez was sending out. She talks about how many survivors are watching her, who now seeing her won't get care or will feel further shame or silence. What do you make of that?
As someone who's been through that, who's talked about going through trauma, we've all experienced that trauma on January 6th. And to equate that with me disparaging other victims of trauma is entirely false. It is an aberration. It is appalling. As someone who is a survivor of rape when I was 16, to say that about me is entirely appalling. And it's disparaging to all women who've been through the same experience, who shouldn't have to go through that.
Representative Mace, I so appreciate you coming on today to talk
Of
about
course.
this. I always appreciate your insight and look forward to having you on again in the future.
Of course. Thank you so much.